Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope all the students are absolutely okay, and I also hope that you have started talking about the classification of consonants, and I also hope that after session number 7 you must have given time to yourself, you must have tried to write, you must have tried to practice. I hope during the last session uh, I tried my level best to give you practice, and I tried to get you people engaged in some sort of activity, because when I picked up the consonant chart, of course the classification of consonant, that chart that elaborates the classification of all consonant sounds, definitely I shall be presenting before you again for a reference. But at the same time, remember that chart is a not so simple chart. That chart is not that should not be taken for granted. In fact, I still remember that when I was having a talk with you during my last session, that when I was saying that please try to focus on this chart, and always think that this is a reference chart. Whenever you forget something, please try to refer to this chart or that table. Why I said that you must have been thinking, and if you have been thinking about this, then let me tell you that I have seen in my own experience that most of the students, I'm talking about those students who try to avoid practicing certain things so far as the consonants or the vowels are concerned, or maybe connected speech is concerned, they are lost. I don't want you to be losing yourself or get lost, in the sense that you got to practice a lot while talking about English phonetics and English phonology. Time and again, I have to refer to English language. There is the importance of this language, not only for you people, but the rest of the students who are doing some other BS or MA or MSc program. Please allow me to say before we start today's session that why I'm talking about the importance of English. Why importance? Because nowadays, you can say not nowadays, for many years, definitely English is playing a dominant role. I'm not saying that the other languages of the world are not important. Always remember, each and every language is so good, so wonderful, and the speakers of the same language are really marvelous human beings. Maybe there is only one speaker of one language, or there are some speakers of one language. All are very, very good human beings. But so far as the policy of the nations is concerned, of course, the nations have got their own policies, and we have got English language policy when we talk about the state of Pakistan. And I think so, officially, definitely, that sometimes we are corresponding in Urdu, and most of the time we are corresponding in English. But rest assured that no language is without use. You just learn Russian, Chinese, German, French, Arabic, Persian, whatever the language, definitely the skill, it is primarily skill at the same time, not only the knowledge but skill at the same time. I hope that I had a talk with you during the last session about one term, that was andragogy. Yes, andragogy. Today I want to start by talking about andragogy, and that's why I have reserved some time before the start of this session. Now, what is in fact the target of that philosophy, that approach, what we call andragogy? The target is always that we may be able to provide the students, of course, the adult learners, knowledge and skill, the relevant knowledge and skill, whatever the discipline we are in. For example, you are studying phonetics and phonology, and I'm your instructor. I am supposed to be talking about phonetics and phonology, but at the same time, I think it is responsibility, rather my responsibility, to tell you that what is the expectation from the adult learner. I talked about this in the previous session as a passing reference, that when we talk about Malcolm Knowles' approach towards this kind of learning, of course, adult learning, of course, the basic thing is that whether the adult learner needs some sort of knowledge or not. So I also said that, all right, it is determined that you people need knowledge, and everyone, I think so, he or she needs knowledge, depending upon the nature of knowledge. But since we need knowledge, uh, why we need knowledge? Of course, to develop some sort of skills. So what happens when one gets knowledge and he or she is a skilled person? So what is the aim of having these two? So remember, the aim of having these two is in fact the change in the attitude or behavior. The most important thing for an adult learner is the whether he or she is going to have some sort of change after having received that much of knowledge regarding a particular discipline or not. So this is what I was thinking, that's very important to talk to you before we start our today's work. Our today's work, what is that? Let's talk and let's find out. Well, my dear students, we are in the fourth week of our learning, and today is session number 8. Today is session number 8, and it is very much connected with the previous session, that was session number 7. And my most favorite request that please try to connect each and every session. This is a complete chain, and you must not forget and must not miss any link. Okay? What are the topics, or the topic we have to talk about today is very important. Classification of English consonants, the basic. But today our dimension is little different, and our today's dimension is the manner of articulation. We talked about the place of articulation and voicing. I tried my level best to provide you certain examples. At the same time, when I talked about voicing and place of articulation, I still remember that I tried to engage you in some sort of activities. Why? Because without doing some sort of activities, maybe with me, or when you are all alone, when you're talking to yourself, or when you are just learning, when you are free, remember the activities are very important. And today, although we're talking about basic of classification of English consonants, but at the same time, today what we are going to talk about basic is the manner of articulation. That means that we need some more time to analyze each and everything. Okay? Well, before I talk about this slide or what's in this slide, I think you remember that when I picked up this session, I had a talk about English language. I don't want to say that English is the only important language in the world, but remember, it is one of the important languages in the world. At that time I was talking differently. This time I'm talking differently. Now, what happens in fact to the child who's learning English, and what happened to you if you never went to any English medium school? For example, I'm talking about myself. I had to go to government school. Of course, government schools were available in those times. Now, it's very important to understand English. English was a subject from grade 6, not from grade 1. Today, you've got opportunity to learn English even from the nursery and playgroup, and then you've got KG, and of course, you jump to class 1. It's very important to understand that after having studied English or about English for the last 14 years, what happens that sometimes we get confused. And I think I put a question on you whether you were studying English or you were studying about English. All right? These branches of linguistics, whether phonetics or phonology or morphology or syntax or semantics, whatever these branches are concerned, first time at the university or college education we come to know what are these branches. So that means we never try to understand this particular language the way it should have been presented before us. We talked about short stories and essays and poems and certain dramas, and maybe one-act dramas and classical dramas, and much more like that. But what happens, in fact, I want to now focus on this slide, your target language, and your target language is English. it's sometimes very difficult in the sense that what kind of language this is, because we have got very strange coordination, or rather no coordination in between the spellings and the sounds. I still remember session number 1 when I talked about one word that was fish, and it's very simple, fish. A child can ask you, all right, why there are 4 letters but there are only 3 sounds? So that means that we are not engaging the students so far as the phonics are concerned. And on the other side, what happens? That if we start talking about phonics and we bring phonics up at the time when we have got to make the student read or study 7, 8 more subjects, it is possible that he or she gets confused. Then what is the way out? That's very important. What is the way out? The best way out, in my point of view, I may be 100% wrong. I'm not trying to establish that what I am saying that is right. Not at all. But I have the right to suggest to you people that the best way out is to generate English speaking environment. So is the case with the little children. So is the case with the little children. I know that most of the parents cannot do this. When we talk about the parents who are all the time thinking about their bread and butter, how can they bring English speaking environment at their home or to their home? Now, then that means the job of the teacher starts. I'm not saying that we have to convert the system into English language system, absolutely not. But sometimes from words to phrases, from phrases to sentences, sometimes what I want to tell you or what I want to establish is we have to get the ears of the students trained. This is the training of the ears. Now, the statement says your target language has sounds that sometimes appear new to you, new to some of you. I'm not saying all of you. The sounds, I'm referring to sounds. I'm not talking about alphabet. The statement says your target language has sounds that sometimes appear new to some of you. I'm not saying everyone. It is possible some of you, maybe it is possible all of you are coming across these sounds first time. Or you know already sounds, but unconsciously because you've been producing these sounds. But when the symbol is in front of you, it is very strange. You start thinking what kind of thing this is that I'm going to study about. As I told you, that what are the symbols? What are the phonemes? Distinctive, yes, exactly. Distinction is there, that each symbol is reserved for one particular sound. So it is possible that during the course of studies, when you are just talking about, learning about phonetics and phonology, you may have certain moments when you feel a little bit tired, sometimes bored, very bored. And it is very much possible that all of you start thinking in other terms, and you start thinking that I'm a new person now. Now I am engaged in the world of English. This is what I want to know, that how English sounds are produced, how they're made. Now, what is the best way out? If you have got this kind of feeling, this slide tells you that the best way for you to master the articulation of these sounds is to understand basic concepts behind them. So my central point is that we must try to understand the basic concepts which are behind articulation, which are behind phonetics. Without understanding the basic concepts, what happens that we are lost and we are sent to the straitjacket. We do not know what to do. We find ourselves so helpless, nobody is there to help us. Now, you're lucky enough, really, let me tell you very honestly, that you have got this kind of training, virtual training, because each and every trainer or the instructor or the facilitator or your teacher, he or she is trying his or her level best to make the concepts clear. The most important thing is the conceptual understanding. Whenever you talk about any course, whether it's phonetics and phonology, it's pragmatics, it's morphology, it's semantics, it's syntax, it's stylistics, whatever it is, or it's maybe poetry, maybe drama, classical or modern, whatever. Maybe it is American literature. And maybe there are certain other courses you are having at the moment. Of course, you should be having, inshallah, in the coming semesters. Remember, the conceptual understanding is the most important part of your studies. And this is what I am suggesting to you people, that for understanding phonetics and phonology, what you need to do is you have to understand the concepts behind them. That why this one symbol. First of all, we must be learning, yes, exactly, there are speech sounds. Human speech sounds are there. And then, is there any study which tells us, or which may tell us, that what are these sounds, how these are produced, how these are received? And then, of course, you jump into the world of phonetics. And when you reach phonetics, of course, on the gate it is written, here comes the phonetics to welcome you. And this is what the first slide was. First slide was, welcome to phonetics. When you are entering through the door where it is written, welcome to phonetics, of course, inside you have got a wonderful world. And the wonderful world is of wonderful concepts, the concepts which govern, which are behind each and everything. That yes, there are human speech sounds. Yes, there is a way to produce sounds. Yes, there are speech organs which play different roles. Yes, there is the way to pronounce them. Yes, there are places. Yes, there are articulators. And yes, when we are finished with these, there is something for the listener. There is something for the hearer. So that's why I'm taking too much time to make you understand the importance of this slide, that what you need to do is that you have to go behind, after the concepts which are ruling them, the concepts which tell us something about articulation of sounds, production of sounds, processing of the same sounds. So for that reason, I am telling you that you must try to develop the concepts behind them. Is it okay? Good. My dear students, before we proceed, I think it is appropriate, so far as my own understanding is concerned, to present before you the summary of the classification of consonants so far as English is concerned. The summary. Last time, what happened to you? We tried to understand the class, right? And we said bilabial. And afterwards, in the second column, we tried to understand the articulators involved. But this time, we have to learn the structure involved. Last time, during the session number 7, I tried to make you understand, number 1, what is the name or what is the class type. And we came to know bilabial, labiodental, dental, alveolar, plato-alveolar. Do you remember? Yes, exactly. But today we have to talk about, so far as the classification is concerned, what is the structure involved in the production of the sounds written in the third column. So today, first of all, I'll try to present before you the summary in another way, by presenting before you another dimension. And the dimension is, number 1, stop. Manner of articulation. What happens? Complete closure. Complete closure of what? Yes, exactly. Sometimes lips part, before the lips, sometimes before the lips, where, yes, exactly, after larynx, when the airstream reaches the soft palate. Complete closure. When I say stop, complete closure. Do you remember the burst of some sort of air, a bursting of air, the pressure? So the first class is stop. The structure involved, complete closure, and the sounds are p, B, T, D, K, G. Then we have got two separate but written in the same box. One is the affricate, the next one is the fricative. In the affricate, first closure, then slow separation. First closure, then slow separation. For example, ch, first closure, isn't it? First closure and then slow separation. Ch, j. Next is fricative, narrowing resulting audible friction. Narrowing resulting audible friction. Try to understand the sounds and say after me. Narrowing resulting audible friction. And the sounds are f, v, th, the, s, z, sh, j. The next category of the class is nasal. What is the structure involved? Complete closure in the mouth, and then air escapes through nose. Complete closure in mouth, and then air escapes through nose. And the sounds are m, n, ing. The next class is lateral. Closure in the center of mouth, air escapes over the sides of tongue, as I told you already, and the sound is l. The next is frictionless continuant. Slight narrowing, not enough to cause friction, and the sound is r, r. Then the final class is semivowels or semi-consonants. Slight narrowing, not enough to cause friction, and the sounds are w, y. So this is another table you must remember, but you must not forget the first table which I presented before you during session number 7. That is your reference table. You must not forget that table. Is it clear? Well, we have talked about the manner of the articulation. We have talked about the classification. And in the previous slide, we tried to understand the name of the class, at the same time what kind of structure involved in the production of certain sounds. And before that, we also try to understand the class of the consonant sound, and of course what are the articulators involved, and what is the outcome, what kind of sounds we are left with. We talked about bilabial, for example. We know what articulators involved, because we know p, b, m, and of course sometimes w, so far as the articulators are concerned. But it is very important to understand now what is manner of articulation, by the way, because we have to now give a detailed analysis of the manner of articulation. But let's read this statement and then try to understand what in fact we are jumping into. The manner of articulation is the way the air stream is affected as it flows from the lungs and out the nose and mouth. Very simple. How? What are the things? What are speech organs? What happens in fact to air stream? The air stream we try to understand. Do you remember when I presented before you a slide starting from the abdomen? And I named diaphragm. So some muscles, yes, exactly. And at the same time, what happens? We have got the ribs cage. So all these are external body parts which are helping lungs to push air upward, definitely through the windpipe, and of course it goes and takes a first stop at the larynx, voice box and vocal folds, right? So that is the first processor. So this slide is telling us what is manner of articulation, and the answer is that it is the way the airstream is affected as it flows from the lungs out the nose and mouth. So there is some sort of effect on the lungs when they not I mean on the lungs, but of course on the airflow, of course the airstream, which in fact is converted into different sounds. As I provided you the example of flute, do you remember how does flute work? Yes, exactly. Some of you, it is possible that you know how to play flute, and those who know how to play flute, they can understand what I am saying. So right, so airstream is coming upward from the lungs area, of course from lungs, and what happens to it? Of course from the lungs and out the nose and mouth, something is there, something happens to it. This is what we call manner of articulation. Let's try to understand manner of articulation through this diagram. Something happens to airflow, airstream. This is what I was trying to tell you, isn't it? Now you can understand that of course the entire world is over here. This is what we call the manner of articulation. The manner of articulation. You can see the larynx part, then alright, larynx opening into pharynx, epiglottis, pharynx is there. But remember, these are only names, my dear students. These are not only names. The air, we tried to understand in the previous slide, the air, something happens to airflow. When air is pushed upward from the lungs area, something happens to it. And the first part I told you, the first place something happens is the vocal folds, vocal bands, the voice box, the processor. And afterwards what happens, we are left with oral cavity or nasal cavity. And through the tables and through other demonstration, now you're in the position to understand that either the air is to pass, if it wants to go out, either the route available for the air is either the oral cavity or the nasal cavity. And except three sounds in English, what I'm trying to establish, m, n, and ing, most of the sounds are produced through, yes, exactly, the oral cavity or the oral tract. This is very important to understand, right? And over there, the most significant and very important articulator is tongue, because I told you time and again, I've been telling you that the best part that is played by any articulator, I'm not saying it is the only articulator that plays the best part, but remember, this is the most active articulator. And after this, we are left with what? We are left with lips. Okay, can you bring your upper lip down? You cannot, but you can take the lower lip up. So that means again the lower lip is another a bit active articulator, right? So where the teeth are concerned, what happened? They are waiting for the tongue, for the active articulator to either to come close to them or touch them. At the same time, what about the alveolar ridge? What about the hard palate? And what about the soft palate? What about that? Do they leave their place? Never. They never, because they are fixed. But this is the tongue. This is what I told you. That is a blessing of nature by our Creator, that He has bestowed on us this beautiful part as a speech organ, because it is all the time moving inside our body, inside our mouth, and that is playing the significant role. At the same time, what happens, for example, okay, that's another story about the sounds which are to be produced, or the air which is to be sent through the root of oral cavity. But what about the nasal sounds? What about the nasal sound? It's very important to understand. Because tongue again, the back of the tongue, of course, velum part, the last part, of course, tongue and velum. So at the same place they are occurring, they are having their position. That is the spot where air is blocked, and of course air is blocked to go to oral cavity. Air is not allowed to go to oral cavity when we are producing m, n and ing sound. So at that time the nasal cavity starts playing its role. All right, and through the nostrils we can feel them. For example, if you produce the sound m, you can feel some sort of vibration in the nostrils. N, you can just feel it. And when you say ing, at this time I am producing this sound and I'm feeling. When I'm producing, I'm feeling. I'm sure if you get yourself engaged in this activity, and you can stop the demonstration and you can produce this sound. So my point is established. At this time, the manner of articulation, there are two cavities available only. One is the nasal cavity, the other is the oral cavity. So most of the sounds are produced through the oral cavity, except some, and the some are m, n and ing. So this is the point you must remember. You must not forget the role of other speech organs. I'm not demeaning the status of other speech organs. I'm trying to tell you that how in fact they coordinate with the main articulator, that is the active articulator, the most active articulator, because they become the passive articulator, right? And this seems, and it is absolutely, tongue is the active articulator. Okay? Now let's try to understand through another dimension. I hope that the previous slide is very much stored in your mind. When we talk about manner of articulation, at that time we try to understand the role of two cavities, of course, oral cavity and nasal cavity. Now let's read first of all this statement and then try to understand what in fact we want to understand and know. According to the manner of articulation, which describes the types of obstruction caused by the narrowing or closure of the articulators, the consonants can be divided into nasals, stops, in bracket plosives, fricatives, affricates, approximants, and lateral. Now we come to know the chart or the table we have seen just now. A couple of slides before, you came across a table. Now we understand what does manner of articulation mean. In fact, what does it mean? According to the manner of articulation, which describes the type of obstruction caused by the narrowing or closure of the articulators. Manner of articulation is primarily concerned with what? Obstruction. Obstruction of what? Of course, the airflow. Yes, exactly, the airstream. That is caused by what? By the articulators. And what is the cause? Either the articulators are narrow or complete close. In other words, I'm trying to say, when we produce certain sounds, what happens? The articulators inside our mouth, either they get very narrow, or sometimes absolutely close to each other, one another, or sometimes they block the airstream, the airflow. And what happens? When it happens, narrowing or closure of the articulators, the sounds are then divided. Then there is a new way to call these sounds, the class of consonants, new way to classify them. And what is that, or what are those? They are either nasals, stops, fricatives, affricates, approximants, and lateral. So these are the names we have given to different consonant sounds of English. I am particularly saying English. Why? Because I want you to understand. I want you to understand. So according to what? According to the articulators. And then the way, I mean, the manner of the articulators, either they get narrow to each other or one another, or they are in the shape of closure. They have closed everything. That's why then we can divide these consonants into what? Into nasals, stops. Stops mean plosives. You can remember, yes, per. Yes, exactly. Then fricatives, affricates, approximants, and lateral, because we have to study them in detail in the coming days, or yes, definitely maybe in the second, maybe in the next session I shall pick it up. Okay. Now I want you to understand manners of articulation in the light of this particular slide. If you want to understand the previous slide, the narration was given there. Please try to understand now. Now, the type of closure or narrowing at the point of articulation. This is what I meant when I was talking about the articulators narrowing a closure. The type of closure or narrowing at the point of articulation, at the point of articulation, at the place of articulation. I'm not talking about manner of articulation. At the point of articulation, when we come to know that, for example, when we call two lips are absolutely closed, what we are left with? We are left with stops, or in other words, you can call them plosive. So that's why there are 6 kinds of manner of articulation. How many kinds? There are 6 kinds of manner of articulation, and this manner of articulation is closely attached with the point of articulation. The point of articulation, when two lips together, absolute closure is there, and we are left with what kind of consonants? Plosives or stops. Are you getting the point? So there are 6 kinds of manner of articulation. The first one is plosive, of course, stops. The nasal, fricative, affricates or affricative, lateral, and approximant. You can call glide at the same time, but approximant. Okay? My dear students, as I told you that we shall be talking in detail, of course, the technical aspects so far as manner of articulation is concerned in the coming session. That's why I want you to understand the theoretical area of manner of articulation. And it's very important because we have to talk about each and every consonant sound when we'll be picking up the next session. So it is very important that whatever we have done so far in today's session, it's very important to understand through this slide. Yes, this slide talks about the description of manner of articulation. Description of manner of articulation. We've talked about plosive, nasal, fricative, lateral, proximant, and affricate, of course, fricative and affricate. The both categories fall under there. So it's very important to understand the description of manner of articulation before we pick up something more technical. I want you to be with me, and I want you to read what I'm reading. Take a pause and we shall go gently. Now, are you with me? Let's talk about the manner first of all. You can see there are 2 columns in this slide. In this table, we have got manner caption, and we have got description. We are describing primarily manner of articulation. What is manner of articulation? What is in fact manner of articulation? Let's describe it. First manner is plosive. Plosive. Produced by the obstruction of airstream from the lungs, followed by a release of the airstream. Stops or plosive, both are same. Sometimes 2 names are given. I repeat, plosives are what? Produced by the obstruction of airstream from the lungs, followed by a release of the airstream. The burst of air, the pressure. For example, if I produce these sounds, you can feel the pressure. P. B, T, D, K, G. So you can feel there is explosiveness when we produce these sounds. P, B, T, D, K, G. If I use these sounds in some words, for example, P, potato, pencil, pen, picture, B, badge, bat, T, tea, teacher, D, doll, dog, K, kite, kite, kangaroo, G, gun, gun, girl. And then the second manner is the nasal manner, produced by the release of the air through the nasal cavity. This is what I've been telling you. M, N, ing. Produced by the release of the air through the nasal cavity. So nasal cavity allows the passing of these sounds, of course, through nostrils. M, mango, man, minister, N, no, nose, ing, sing, sing, song. And then fricative manner, produced by the release of a friction-like noise, produced by the release of a friction-like noise created by the airstream escaping through a variant of narrow gaps in the mouth. Now try to understand these sounds. F, family. V, vote. F, thick. The, this. S, sun. Z, zebra. Sh, shoe. J, pleasure. H, high. And then the lateral approximant. As you know that we have got only one lateral sound, that is L, but the manner is lateral approximant. How produced? Say after me. Produced by the obstruction of the airstream at a point along the center of the oral tract with incomplete closure between one or both sides of the tongue and the roof of the tongue. Say after me, L. L. The side of the tongue. They are allowing the air. Then the next manner is approximant. Produced by proximity, closeness of the two articulators without turbulence. There is no turbulence. Hard movement and friction like noise. No turbulence. No turbulence. Such as W, R, and Y. W, wall, R, ring. No turbulence you can feel. Y, yes, yesterday. And then the affricate. We have seen the fricative and we have got affricate. Because in the previous slide in that table, I told you that, all right, in one column, in one box, both were there. Do you remember? During the previous session, I had a talk with you, and now in this session, I also talked about the fricative and affricate. They were in the same box, but now different manners are there. Because in the fricative world, we have got what sounds? F, V, Th, D, S, Z, Sh, J, H. How many are there? 9. Absolutely right. And now the affricate. We have got 2 sounds in affricate. Now let's try to understand the manner. Produced by involving more than one of those manners of articulation. Firstly, produce the sound in the alveolar ridge. Produce the sound in the alveolar ridge, then followed by or combined with fricative sounds. Followed by with fricative sound. This is what I was telling you. That's why they were in one box. Both the caption, fricative and affricate, they were in one box, but separately mentioned. And the sounds are ch, j, ch, j, ch, j. Are you getting my point? So the description of manner of articulation, this is what we've been talking about with the help of this slide. So how many descriptions are there? 6 descriptions are there. How many manners are there? 6 manners are there. And the manners are plosive, nasal, fricative, lateral approximant, and affricate. What are the sounds fall under this manner so far as the plosive is concerned? P, B, T, D, K, G. What are the sounds fall under nasal manner? M, N, ing. What are the sounds fall under fricative manner? F, V, Th, The, S, Z, Sh, J, H. What is the sound that falls under lateral approximant manner? L. Very good. And what are the sounds fall under approximant manner? 3. W, R, Y. W, R, Y. And what are the sounds fall under affricate manner? Ch, J, Ch, J. Now it's very important that when we are going to talk about the manner of articulation, today we have tried to understand what is manner of articulation. Of course, that is associated with point of articulation. We cannot separate it because all these 3 bases, voicing, point of articulation, and manner of articulation, they work together. It is not possible. Yes, exactly, for understanding, say, so for the understanding of concepts is concerned, that's what we have to separate them. And that's why we gave maximum time to voicing to understand what is voicing. Right? There are certain voice sounds, there are certain voiceless sounds. Yes, consonants, 15 consonants are voice sounds and 9 consonants are voiceless sounds. Whereas vowels, so as English vowels are concerned, of course, all vowels are voice sounds. Alright? And then we try to understand the point or place of articulation. Right? What is the role of articulators? What kind of role they play? What kind of their position? And then finally we try to understand the manner of articulation. So these 3 concepts, in fact, they work together. In the articulatory phonetics, remember, this is what I told you, we have to understand the manner of articulation with reference to articulatory phonetics. It is not easy and possible for us to understand the manner of articulation and point of articulation and at the same time voicing without understanding articulatory phonetics. Because we are left with what? We are left with the most important part of phonetics, that is articulation. If somebody is unable to articulate the sound properly, do you think that we can process the sound? Do you think we can classify the sound? For the classification of all the consonants, remember, we must be knowing what is articulatory phonetics. Because we understand manner of articulation, point of articulation, voicing under the banner of what? Articulatory phonetics. Absolutely right. So you must not forget this idea or this concept that without understanding articulative phonetics, without understanding articulative phonetics, that we can understand these concepts. So please, in the beginning, I told you and I requested you that you must focus on articulative phonetics. Is that clear? And finally, before we leave this session, as practice, I told you that the most important part of any session is the self-assessment part, because we can understand what we've been discussing throughout the session. And when I talk about self-assessment, I'm not talking about you only, I'm talking about myself at the same time. Because I told you, I still remember that during the first session I had a talk with you that the most important thing is the learning. Job of the instructor is to ensure learning, and definitely for that particular purpose what he or she tries is that he or she brings certain types of activities, certain types of examples, and of course this is the job of the instructor to get the learners engaged in such a way that there is not the feeling of boredom. Sometimes what happens that there are feelings of boredom so far as the learning is concerned. I try my level best, not today, but I've been trying my level best to make it quite natural. Because if the slides are in front of me and I'm reading out the slides, that doesn't get the job done. My purpose is not to get the job done, or the slides are in front of me and I'm reading them out. No, it is not the case. Virtual learning becomes significant in my point of view that we must try to make it natural. It is possible that some of the people, some of the experts do not agree with me, but at least I have the right to talk about my own philosophy regarding virtual learning and virtual training and virtual teaching. I feel that it depends upon the power of visualization or imagination of the instructor, whether he or she is assuming that all his listeners, his students or her students, they are in front of him. And when you have developed this kind of imagination that yes, exactly, they are listening to me. For example, I am sitting in front of me, there is another place, and I feel that some of my students are sitting in front of me, and sometimes really, to be honest and fair enough, I smile. I smile with the hope that yes, exactly, I'm talking to my students who are watching me, who are in front of me. That's why I try to get you people engaged in some sort of activities. Now, so far as the virtual learning and teaching are concerned, always remember that the time is not allowed when you, for example, during the class when you are just watching this kind of demonstration. But why I'm just giving you this kind of activities, because I want to give you some sort of clue that after the class you can get yourself engaged whenever you are free in this kind of activities. And these are not the activities. There are many activities available online. There are many activities available in the printed material. So what you need to understand is that what part is significant for me, what is important for me to understand. For instance, of articulative phonetics, what part is important for me to understand acoustic phonetics, what part is important for me to understand auditory phonetics, then what are consonant sounds, what is the difference between consonant and a vowel sound. There are certain sources, there is much material is available all around us, but the only thing is that you have to spot the material. You don't have to run after the unnecessary things which in fact are not which in fact is not contributing but confusing you. I want you not to get confused. I want you not to get panic. The best part is that you stay calm, listen to the instructor carefully, get yourself engaged after the session to read some more material, and then try to just build something on the foundation you have during these sessions. So I hope that's okay. So please write down something, try to explain what do you know about manner of articulation, in the light of the session we have had today. And after this, I hope that you will be just putting the same answer into your folder, which is very important part of your academic learning. And while closing this session, I would like to say goodbye and good luck. Stay blessed.